a lot of opportunities and a lot of things that can be done, even if there is, this subject of the recession not is something, it's been bouncing around in the back of the news, and it's something that's not necessarily that needs to stop your business. So an important starting point here is, what are IP assets? Because it's important to understand that intellectual property is an asset, something I think many people may not really get their minds around. But one thing that you have to, understand is that intellectual property is part of every business. I've mentioned that previously. And it doesn't matter whether you're, just launching, whether you've been operating, whether you're small, mid-size, even large corporations, even turnaround situations today, it's all about intellectual property. That's the predominant piece of every business today.
One of the strongest reasons being that it creates additional options for maximizing economic value. Each form of intellectual property comes bundled with a whole set of rights, exclusionary rights, that can be used to achieve and implement licensing programs, joint ventures, strategic alliances, or other mutually beneficial business arrangements. So it's a rich and diverse array of assets, each of which comes with its own form of unique exclusionary rights, but all of which are fully compatible and work together to provide maximum value for the owner of the intellectual property.
And the other thing to understand is that as an intangible asset, it also performs or operates differently in a changing economic environment than do tangible assets. And predominantly what you see in that is the fact that we're in an environment now where a lot of tangible assets such as inventory, equipment, manufacturing, distribution is declining in value. There's a lot of issues that drive that asset class to decline in value. And so what happens on the other side with IP is IP, on the other hand, because it's a non-tangible asset, its value can actually increase because it's fluid. It doesn't necessarily have to be locked inside of a tangible form. And that's where, licensing strategy comes into play. And so what happens is, as your revenues fall, as it gets slower, as your competition tightens, maybe customers start to diminish, these assets take a toll in the form of costs. On the other side, you have an asset light approach, which is the licensing approach. In this case, what you're doing with licensing and what you're doing with managing your IP, you're managing it as an asset, but that doesn't require, you're not looking at it from the standpoint of having to make and sell and produce and support that. What you're looking at it from, and what you're doing with it, is you're approaching it from the innovation standpoint. That is, you've innovated, you created intellectual property, and you're using licensing as your go-to-market strategy. And in many times, these partners can do more with your IP than you can, because especially if you're a small business or you have limitations or restrictions on finances or manufacturing capacity or distribution capacity or whatever the case is, licensing enables you to remove those limitations, remove those restrictions by finding partners who have, if you will, extra capacity or have the resources. I mean, that's a lot of what, when you talk about strategies, is looking at finding extra capacity, because it's not always the case when it comes to innovation that you have to do it yourself directly. It can be your IP that can do it for you through licensing. And you're using licensing as the strategy to work with partners who have the heavy assets in place, if you will. So in other words, instead of you having to, the challenges of running the business of make and sell, working with those heavy assets, you can use licensing to lighten the load, if you will.